Hello. Drug traffickers are among the most despicable individuals in the world. They build their lavish lives on the suffering of others, even on the breakdown of other families. Yet their lives are often marked by strange colors and contain many thrilling experiences that are both shocking and thought-provoking. The main character in this story is an extreme example of such a legendary villain. He was once the biggest drug lord in Panama, an ally in life and death with notorious Colombian drug lords such as Blanco, Escobar, and the Ochoa brothers. He was also the commander-in-chief of the National Guard and the director of Panama's intelligence and anti-drug agency, the supreme spiritual leader of the nation. A military dictator who ruled over a territory until he was overthrown by the USA military commanded by George Bush. He was a top foreign agent trained by the CIA and collaborated for many years, receiving direct orders from former CIA Director George Bush. At the same time, he was a close friend of Fidel Castro, USA sworn enemy, and sold many important pieces of information to USA intelligence agencies. When he was obedient to the USA government turned a blind eye to all his crimes, such as drug trafficking, kidnapping, and murder. However, when he began to push the USA out of the Panama Canal for national interests, George Bush did not hesitate to resort to internal cleansing, perhaps even to silence him as he knew too many truths. His existence had become too dangerous for some in the USA government. If his life were made into a film, it would be an intense spy action movie, combining courage and cowardice, betrayal and loyalty and grudges and hatred. It would be a film about drug smuggling, political assassination, terrorism, and thrilling warfare. He is the only drug lord in the world who has ever been a head of state, the most powerful source of information in the history of human intelligence, a mastermind in political maneuvering, and a man who exposed the false face of USA, a cunning villain named Manuel Noriega. Noriega was an intelligence genius, evident from the day he was born, as even the CIA did not know his exact birth year. Born into a poor family, his parents died when he was just 5 years old, leaving him an orphan raised by his grandmother. From a young age, Noriega set out on a path of knowledge to change his fate. He worked hard to gain admission to the best high school in Panama, the National Institute. There, he joined a socialist youth group and wrote many critiques of USA colonization of Panama. Upon graduating, he wrote a life plan on the school boat with dreams of becoming a psychologist, becoming the president of Panama, and driving the USA out of the Panama Canal area. Why did Noriega harbor such a deep hatred for USAs from a young age? This hatred stemmed from the fact that the USA monopolized the Panama Canal and manipulated the Panama province after it separated from Colombia. During the exploration period, Magellan proposed to the Spanish king to build a canal in the narrow isthmus of Panama to connect the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. This idea aimed to facilitate the quick transportation of plundered assets from the Pacific coast to Spain. However, Spain, weakened and unable to carry out the project, saw the USA seize the opportunity after Panama broke away from Spanish colonial rule and became a province of Colombia. Colombia was the first country to start the canal project, but after nearly 30 years, they had only dug 1/3 of it, and the company undertaking the project went bankrupt. The USA immediately jumped in and declared their intention to take over. However, Colombia disagreed, and the USA, angered, incited tensions between the Panama province and Colombia, encouraging the Panamanian people to pursue democracy and freedom. In November 1903, the USA pushed Panama to declare independence. Colombia sent troops to suppress the rebellion, but was defeated by the USA military and forced to cede the territory. After Panama's independence, the USA and Panama signed the Habonao-Varia Treaty, granting USA perpetual and exclusive ownership of the Panama Canal area. In return, Panama received $10 million and an additional $250,000 annually starting 9 years later. Panama ceded a 10-mile wide strip of land to serve as the Canal Zone, which the USA took over permanently and exercised sovereignty over. Thus, Panama became a dependent state of the USA and USA capitalists built the Panama Canal at the cost of countless local workers' lives, including masons and laborers. The canal essentially became an overseas territory of the USA, fueling Noriega's determination, from a young age, to drive out the USA. However, Noriega was not a revolutionary with steadfast beliefs. His ambitions were clearly priced. From a young age, he became a speculator solely focused on money. During high school, while Noriega participated in progressive student movements, he also received money from the CIA. The USA turned him into a spy, providing information about student movements. In 1955, at around 20 years old, Noriega received his first intelligence payment from the USA, amounting to $10,700. Noriega had a half-brother working at the Panamanian embassy in Peru. With his brother's help, after graduating from high school, Noriega went to Lima, Peru, to study at the Carrillo's Military Academy. After graduating from military school, Noriega returned home and joined the Panamanian National Guard, becoming an aide to Omar Torrijos, a military strongman of Panama. Noriega became Torrijos' loyal enforcer, carrying out many dirty tasks such as beating, arresting, and harassing members of opposition parties. Torrijos greatly appreciated Noriega's ruthless and decisive behavior. Torrijos sent Noriega to the USA School, run by the USA military in the Canal Zone, to enhance his knowledge in intelligence and psychology. This school trained pro-USA figures in the region. During his studies, Noriega established a closer working relationship with Washington through the school's leadership. He continuously provided intelligence about labor movements in Central USA countries to the USA. Noriega's achievements were highly valued by his USA bosses, and then-President Lyndon Johnson remarked that, at 30, Noriega was a valuable asset to the USA and a rising star in the Panamanian military. In 1968, Torrijos launched a military coup and took supreme power in Panama. Almost a year later, before Torrijos could stabilize his power, a group of reserve soldiers initiated a military coup. Noriega safely protected Torrijos and quelled the coup. In recognition of his efforts, Torrijos promoted him to the position of Deputy General of Panama, responsible for intelligence, surveillance, and anti-drug operations. With Noriega's intelligence support, and as an intermediary, Torrijos and President Jimmy Carter signed a treaty in which the USA agreed to return sovereignty of the Canal Zone to Panama in 1999. By the 1970s, during the peak of the Cold War, the USA increasingly relied on the intelligence Noriega provided about revolutionary Central USA countries like Cuba, Nicaragua, and El Salvador. Consequently, his relationship with USA intelligence agencies grew closer. In 1971, the CIA officially listed Noriega as an employee with a high salary of $200,000 per year, along with a $100,000 annual emergency fund that he managed. After 1976, Noriega began reporting directly to George Bush, who was then the CIA director. Once Bush finished his tenure as head of the liaison office in Beijing, George Bush quickly discovered that Noriega had many tricks up his sleeve and was even making deals with hostile countries. Indeed, Noriega was a master of manipulation, not shying away from any means to make money. While he earned from providing intelligence about Cuba to the USA, he also sold thousands of Panamanian passports to Fidel Castro for $5,000 each to support Cuba and the Soviet Union. What troubled George Bush the most was that Noriega was also aiding Colombian drug lords in trafficking drugs into the USA. During the 1970s and 1980s, Colombian drug lords were rising rapidly, with the Medellin cartel, led by Escobar, Blanco, and the Ochoa brothers, being the most prominent. Due to ongoing civil wars in Central USA countries such as Colombia, El Salvador, and Guatemala, Medellin cartel leaders needed a new drug transit point. Panama, with its favorable and peaceful location, became a prime target. At that time, Noriega, the head of Panama's anti-drug agency, was solely motivated by money, and the two sides quickly collaborated. The drug lords received Panama customs stamps and hiding places from Noriega. Once, when the Ochoa brothers' sister was kidnapped while transporting goods through Panama, Noriega used his influence to rescue her. a daughter of Escobar, born in Panama, was also given a Panamanian residence by Noriega. According to Escobar's son, Noriega received $5 million from his father to help build a drug empire in Panama. However, Torrijos did not support Noriega's drug trafficking and concealed evidence of Noriega's drug activities from George Bush, frequently criticizing him. Feeling betrayed, Noriega began to view Torrijos as an obstacle to his drug trade and ambitions. In 1981, Torrijos died in a plane crash while on foreign duty, and many suspected it was a scheme orchestrated by Noriega. After Torrijos' death, Noriega naturally became the new king of Panama and was no longer restrained by Torrijos. From then on, Noriega's collaboration with Colombian drug lords became more unrestricted. Panama quickly turned into a major drug transit hub and hotspot for drug lords. Noriega earned $300 million from protection money, bribes and interest through money laundering channels in Europe, even purchasing a large villa in France. George Bush was well aware that Noriega had opened a highway for drug trafficking from Colombia into the USA. He knew that removing Noriega would stop the main channel bringing drugs into the USA. However, he could not act directly because Noriega was very compliant. He only hinted that if Noriega stopped drug trafficking, he would increase the intelligence budget for him. Nevertheless, the cooperation between Noriega and Colombian drug lords, like Escobar, was not smooth. Once Escobar sent $1.4 million worth of drugs through Panama into the USA, and Noriega collected $1 million in fees. This strained the relationship between Noriega and Escobar, leading Noriega to turn against him and start an anti-drug campaign in Panama, shutting down many of Escobar's operations. As a result, their relationship completely collapsed. Former USA Secretary of State under Reagan, George Shultz, said that you can never completely buy Noriega, you can only hire him. However, the close relationship between Noriega and the USA did not last long. Between 1920 and 1982, the USA earned more than $45 billion from the Panama Canal, while Panama received only $1.1 billion. Noriega grew increasingly dissatisfied with the meager earnings from his drug trafficking and intelligence operations. Previously, Noriega might have kept silent, but after years of dictatorship, he began to openly disregard George Bush. For instance, he ruthlessly eliminated political rivals, oppressed the people, and declared election results invalid. More importantly, the world knew that Noriega was a product of USA training, and his behavior was completely contrary to what USA prided themselves on regarding democracy and freedom. A valuable asset had now become a burden on America's reputation and on George Bush personally. After George Bush became president in 1989, he secretly sent agents to accuse Noriega of drug trafficking and extortion in the USA. Upon learning that he was being indicted by the USA in their own country, Noriega felt humiliated and launched a large-scale anti-USA campaign. From February 1988 to May 1989, there were 600 incidents of tension involving USA military personnel and their families in Panama. Subsequently, George Bush invoked a clause in the Hebuna-Varilla Treaty that allowed the USA military to conduct unlimited military exercises in the Canal Zone. The USA troops stationed in Panama conducted a series of small exercises to warn Noriega, but Noriega was not intimidated. Firstly, since his youth, he had aspired to become a psychologist, and as an adult had written a textbook on psychological warfare, becoming an expert in the field of psychological operations. Secondly, after years of being the ruler of Panama, his ego had grown to an extraordinary level, and before being overthrown by the USA, Noriega had nearly reached the zenith of his power. During one of the USA military exercises, Noriega suddenly appeared with his entourage, walked straight to shake hands with the USA soldiers, and said into the camera, "Here I am, arrest me." On December 15, 1989, Noriega proactively declared war on the USA. He stepped onto the podium brandishing a large knife and shouting, "We will sit on both sides of the canal and watch the enemy's corpses float out to sea." The next day, Panama's National Defense Forces accidentally killed a USA Marine beat an officer and threatened to rape his wife. George Bush could no longer tolerate the situation, as the Panama Canal contributed 10% of America's total trade volume and could not be allowed to be lost. On December 20th, 1989 at dawn in Panama City, 27,000 heavily armed USA troops launched an attack on the small nation. This was the largest military operation by the USA since the Vietnam War. The invasion had nothing to do with justice and bore a sarcastic name, Operation Just Cause. According to statistics, the USA invasion of Panama cost the lives of 23 USA soldiers and 3 USA civilians, while about 150 Panamanian soldiers and around 500 Panamanian civilians were killed. Noriega had long been the target of a manhunt by USA Delta Force. After the war broke out, Special Forces, Air Force units, and particularly Delta Force all came to confront him. Delta Force raided 42 locations that could be Noriega's hiding places, but did not find him. Eventually, a close bodyguard of Noriega revealed his hiding place at the Vatican Embassy. The USA military quickly surrounded the location to prevent reporters from eavesdropping inside the embassy with long microphones. The USA military used loudspeakers to create a sound barrier. On December 27th, the USA military's Psychological Operations Team 4 joined the campaign to persuade Noriega to surrender. This team consisted of young men in their early 20s. They changed the broadcast sound to heavy metal rock music and played it continuously 24 hours a day, as rock music could make people irritable and continuous play could prevent Noriega from getting any rest. The ironic thing is that Noriega later recalled that the room he was in was so soundproof that he could not hear the rock music at all. Instead, the 24-hour continuous heavy metal rock music drove the embassy staff nearly insane. At 9 p.m. on January 3, 1990, with no escape left, Noriega emerged from the Vatican Embassy, wearing his tattered 4-star general uniform, and officially surrendered to the USA military. His only request was to wear his general's uniform and to participate in the surrender ceremony as the head of state. However, Noriega was mistaken if he thought the USAs would organize such a ceremony. Delta Force and the USA Drug Enforcement Administration escorted him onto a C-130 cargo plane, ordered him to remove his uniform, and instead wear the gray prisoner uniform worn by USA detainees. They also gave him a new name, Prisoner No. 41586. The USA showed Noriega that in their eyes he was just an ordinary criminal. They were not there to fight, but merely to punish a traitor. Noriega was swiftly flown back to the USA and was immediately put on trial in Miami. The jury was instructed not to consider the political aspects of the case, meaning they did not need to worry about whether the USA had the right to invade Panama, arrest Noriega, or try him in the USA, and only needed to quickly convict him. In the end, Noriega was sentenced to 40 years in prison. In 2007, he was released early and then extradited to France for further imprisonment, where he served an additional year. He was eventually returned to Panama to continue serving his sentence and died in prison on May 29, 2017, due to illness. Noriega was undoubtedly guilty, but he was Panamanian and his crimes should have been judged by the people of Panama. Why did the USA military arrest him and bring him straight to the USA for trial? Even though Panama is a small country, but it has sovereignty that should not be violated. Despite the poverty of the Panamanian people, they should not be considered second-class citizens of the USA. The United Nations condemned the USA for violating international law, but global protests against the USA achieved little. The USA has Delta Force Special Forces and the most powerful military force in the world. If they truly want to defeat someone, they will do so. Plainly, this was a political trial, purely retribution. A killing the chicken to scare the monkey tactic, and an ambition to control global order. After Noriega's overthrow, corruption and security issues continued to plague Panama. This central USA country of 3.9 million people once again became a haven for money laundering, tax evasion, and drug trafficking. What do you think of this story? Please leave your thoughts below so everyone can see. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support me. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.